What's up, party people? It's your boy, MC Popsicle, and today I'm super excited because I'm interviewing King Kong. I'm interviewing the actor Alan Henry. He plays King Kong in Kong vs. Godzilla and Kong x Godzilla The New Empire. I'm super excited to talk to him. Also, shout out to my sponsors, Nevin Eyewear and Designs by Galarza. They make all my cool hats. But now, let's get to the video. What up, party people? It's your boy, MC Popsicle, and welcome to Weird Interviews. Mr. Allen, how are you?
I'm doing very well, my man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. Thank you for reaching out. It's always so much fun kind of meeting people and chatting about the things that I love, with people who appreciate that, because my family can only take so much for so long.
Yeah, thank you. The pleasure is all mine. So, I did a bunch of research about you, and I just got buried in all the stuff you've done. You've done so much. So, I was wondering if you could kind of give some of the bigger stuff that you've done, if you could just mention it as far like with
Sure.
movies, and you've done a lot of video game work as well, right?
Yeah, well, I've done some video game work, not a lot. I've done more, definitely done more film work.
Okay.
Yeah, like the most recent one would be Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. So I'm King Kong and the Scar King in the most recent two MonsterVerse films. There is a new one in the works that's going to kick off filming soon,
Yeah.
and we're all a bit hush hush about that. But conversations have started.
Good.
For anyone out there who is a wonderfully weird person, if you've seen the movie Cocaine Bear, I was the
Yeah.
bear. Yeah, I was
That's so
Cokie.
cool. I did read that. I was like, wow, that's so
Yeah,
crazy. That's
yeah,
neat.
yeah. I've done. I mean, I live in New Zealand and I do a lot of work for WetFX. So I've worked on a lot of Marvel films and DC superhero films and monster films, the Planet of the Apes franchise, the Hobbit trilogy. The Avatar movies, all in various forms of performance capture, motion capture roles. And yeah, video game wise, I did some performance capture for Epic Games for their Fortnite, their like winter release, where
Cool.
they defrost Mariah Carey, and for Path of Exile for Grinding Gear Games, I worked on the opening cinematic of that, doing performance capture for a number of the leads in that. So like a few video games. I would absolutely love to do more because I'm a massive fan of video games anyway. So I grew up watching superhero movies and cartoons, and I've had the joy of working on superhero movies and kind of some animated features. And now I'm like, yeah, video games would be fun as well. That would be really fun to do performance capture for. And video games now, they're leaning into that more. They're really trusting the performance of the characters to drive the narrative forward, so they don't just have to focus on gameplay mechanics to kind of entice players in. They've got they've discovered they have a wonderful audience of people who love a good story and love really strong performance. So
Yes,
more of that would be great.
I've noticed that like a lot of these video games, I wasn't really into them until a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow, like the
Mm.
creativity in games is crazy
Mm-hmm.
right now. The storylines,
Yeah.
everything, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Mm.
So,
Mm.
how do you get into motion capture? Like, what kind of
Mm.
skill set do you have that allows you to get into that?
Yeah, good question. Performance capture is, people often ask if there's a difference between acting for film and acting for performance capture, and not really is the answer. Not really. It's acting. You have to have a really strong imagination first and foremost with performance capture, because often you will be working in a volume in a warehouse. You won't be on set. Sometimes you work on set, and that's great. But you often, if they're using performance capture, it's because you're dealing with a character that either cannot be recreated in the physical world or would take far too long and be too complex. So they're going to recreate that digitally in a virtual world. So you really have to have the imaginative strength and creativity to embody that world. and I mean embody physically, but also like you have to imbue this empty warehouse with, you know, the magical world of Pandora while you're looking around. That's the biggest skill, is imagination, and a kind of imagination that lets you make bold choices and take risks. And ideally, you won't encounter a problem if you make a mistake or you fail. You'll have an opportunity to be like, that didn't work, let's tweak it and adjust it, and, you know, try something different and try this and maybe go over here. So you have to, that imagination, you have to be allowed to you have to give yourself permission to collaborate. So you can have an idea, but someone may say, hey, I think I see what you're trying to achieve, but I don't quite think we made it. How can we work together to get this where we need it to go? And
Right.
that's a skill that's easy to talk about, but when crunch time happens, it's a lot harder in practice to do, because you have to deal with your own self-confidence, because you are the one making the choice. There's a lot of risk for you, and you have to deal with your own ego, because you might think it's a great idea and it might work in your mind, and then when you see it on screen or you see it in the feedback, it doesn't quite work. So you have to be willing to compromise and remember that you're part of a collaborative team. Even if you are King Kong, you're still a member of a collaborative team, and you've got, you know, 15 different people in the room, all with very creative minds, who have the ability to help feed into that process and make that creation better. In terms
Right.
of the other skills, like, oh man, take your pick. Being physical helps. So if you've done sports, martial arts, dance, rock climbing, landscaping, anything that forces you to be involved in your body is going to be helpful, because they'll ask you to do weird things. Like, you're carrying this piece of foam, but it's a insanely heavy tree log, and you have to know what it's like to carry something that heavy and that long in your body. You know, and if you have to be something that's got more than two arms and two legs, then you have to be able to figure out how would that inform the way things move. You know, do you have extra muscles that do that? Do they move at the same time? How does that work? You know, so many things factor into this world, because again, it's imaginative. The ideas that get sent to you from the client are always so interesting and so weird, and they're trying to come up with creative and new and interesting ideas for a character. So you have to be able to take those notes on board, embody them, and perform them very quickly, because they'll change all the time. And
Right.
yeah, so like, yeah, if you're an actor wanting to get into this stuff, it's having an acting background, some training is always going to be good than coming into it from cold. Like, yes, you can do it, and some people can learn very, very quickly, but any kind of foundation you can give yourself for performance is always going to be helpful.
Right. So when the King Kong movies came about, was that something you were auditioning for, or were they just like, we have a guy, this is our guy, like we already know?
Yeah, it's more of the latter in my case, because I have such a strong working relationship with WetFX, and I've worked with them for so long. All the animation supervisors and VFX supervisors, they know me and I know them. They know how I can work, and we have a shared vocabulary. So often when a job like Godzilla vs. Kong comes out, they'll say, yeah, let's get Alan in. We know he can do this work. He's very good. You know, everyone appreciates the work that he does, but also he's very easy to work with. So I get asked to do that sort of job from them, basically. For something like Cocaine Bear, that was a little different. Elizabeth Banks called Weta and said, I'm going to be doing this film, and I know we're going to use WetaFX for the VFX. Do you have a guy who can do this stuff on set, so the actors have something to work with, something physical, and something that will give them an emotional kind of, response? And they said, yeah, we know a guy. And they set up a couple of Zoom meetings with Elizabeth and the producers and some of the creative team, and we all had a conversation about, what my approach was in terms of performing this stuff, but also how do I research this role? What steps would I put in place? What would my process on set look like? Because Elizabeth, was, was respectful and humble enough to admit that she had never done this before. So she was like, I don't know how this works. So you need to put my mind at ease that I'm hiring the right person. And I said, oh, great. Okay, well then here's how it would work. And after those 2 Zoom meetings, she was like, I feel comfortable bringing you on board because I know that if there's something I don't know, I feel comfortable asking you to give me advice on it. And to be fair, she didn't need my advice that much. She's got a good head on her shoulders, so she was able to kind of figure it out after the first couple of sessions we did in rehearsals. And then it just kind of flew from there. There have been jobs that I have had to audition for. I recently worked on a Minecraft movie, which premieres in like a couple of weeks.
That'll be cool.
That is going to be fun. It's going to be a very silly film. That was an audition process. They knew that they needed a performer to do some certain things. They auditioned across the country and in Australia, I believe. And I had to go into a studio, pretend to do weird creature movements and, put it all on tape and do silly voices. And then, they kind of went, oh yeah, Alan, he can do what we ask him to do in terms of if we give him weird notes, we can trust that he's going to do what we need. And also he's got this background and experience that we can trust. So in terms of how you get work in this very narrow band of the industry, it's so varied. I'm very good friends with some performers, one of whom is TJ Storm, who has been in like almost every video game ever made. And he gets jobs just off the back of the previous job, you know what I mean? He'll work on like, he worked on like a Marvel game, and then they're like, hey man, if you're around, do you want to come in and do some stuff for Prime are doing Secret Level, we want you to come in and do some stuff. He's like, yeah, sure. And they're like, oh, sweet. Well, if you're here, we've also got this other video game. Like it's this, he's in the right place at the right time, but he's also built up enough of a portfolio and enough experience that they're like, let's just ask him.
Right. That must be nice to be established in that way. That's really cool that you've made it to that point.
Whoa, hold on right there. I just want to give a shout out to Nevin Eyewear. They make all my sunglasses. They're spectacular. And they have a deal right now that if you buy 1 pair of glasses, you get 3. Just make sure to put Popsicle in the code at the checkout and get 3 pairs of glasses for 1. All right, back to the video.
So,
there's always more. There's always further to go. Like there's still, it's it would be nice. It would be nice if my phone was ringing off the hook and I could be like, oh, sorry, no, I've got this other job. But it's still like the industry is still in a weird place post strikes. So it's an interesting time right now.
Yeah, but we're in a good time for you because like it seems like more and more mocap is becoming very important in the industry. So
indeed.
That's really good. Also, so you're gonna be King Kong, and that you got almost 100 years of movies. Where I think we're 8 years away from 100 years, and so you have all this going back. You also, it seems like I was struck in the new movie how well King Kong communicated and how well his personality shone through, even though they don't talk, which I thought was a good idea that they didn't talk. I thought that would make it silly. But so you had to imbue that character with the essence of who he is so he would have a personality. Like how'd you get into that character, and who did you decide you wanted him to be and how he carried himself?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, you're correct. There's such a lineage of King Kong already established, right? There's all these beautiful movies that give you different takes on the aspect of what King Kong is. So I had a relatively easy job in terms of knowing what was already established, what kind of aesthetics and ideas, and in terms of Kong's kind of presence and personality and communication in Godzilla vs. Kong and then Godzilla X Kong, they, Adam Wingard, the director, as well as the VFX team, were always trying to find ways to give an audience something to connect to resonate with Kong, because he's relatively upright a lot in these movies, so there is a humanoid aspect to him. So there's something inherently recognizable in Kong. And so we looked at ways that we could give him small behaviors or affectations that help an audience key in to personifying this character of Kong. So in Godzilla vs. Kong, we have the scene where he wakes up. And the way that he wakes up, we've pushed it to be very, very recognizably human, in terms of like being kind of, being annoyed at how bright the sun is, waking up kind of uncomfortable, scratching his butt before he walks to the shower. That's something, there were a lot of humans that like, yeah, that's something that I do. So there's a connection there. And then when you look at the way that Kong observes and looks at humans, they tried to make sure that there's a level of intelligence where you can see that Kong is seeing the people he's looking at and recognizing them as different and choosing to deal with them in a certain way. And they really did push that connection between Kong and Jia. To be fair, it's credit to Kaylee Hottle, who plays the young actress who plays Jia. She is very talented. And
he's very good in the movie.
Yeah, and so when her footage was sent to Weta for us to kind of match Kong's movement and behavior too, it's very easy to find that emotional connection because she's such a good actress. So the way that, and of course the fact that he communicates with Jia via a similar sign language again was something humanly recognizable. It's like, oh, he can talk. He chooses not to talk to 99% of the humans around him because they annoy him.
Right.
But he has a connection to Jia, and funnily enough, it's not quite the classic King Kong Faye Dunaway connection where he like has to protect or possess this woman.
Right.
I don't know if possession is the right word. I think protect is probably a closer word.
But it seemed like he was kind of in love with her or something. The older one.
Yeah, and I think what they were trying to push was this idea. They were trying to illustrate that this giant titan, this ape, does have emotions and does have feelings and does have, this connection in this human that humans, something that humans recognize. And with Kong and Jia, because Jia starts out as a young girl, they really wanted the audience to know that Kong cares for her as a small person. He's protective of her, but he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop Rebecca Hall's character from like taking her inside or anything like that. Like Kong knows that Jia has a mum and she has like a community around her.
Right.
But the connection is still there. So they have a deep bond where like she obviously cares a great deal about his safety and his well-being, and Kong cares a lot about her safety and her well-being. And
like a dad or something.
Yeah, which they then in Godzilla X Kong, they really illustrated that Kong was looking for his family. He was trying to find family and community and connection, which is something that humans want. Right. And so when he finds Suko and he finds the other apes, it's a moment of like incredible wonder for him because he thought he was the last and suddenly he isn't. And then to have that threatened by the Scar King, you can see why he reacts the way he does. Like he doesn't want to co-lead with Scar King because he recognizes that Scar King is a tyrant. Scar King doesn't have a family, he has an empire. And what Kong wants is a family and a community. So when he sees Scar King being unjust, he naturally moves to defend Suko and the other apes. And and then when he does when he has to admit defeat and he gets beaten and he has to run away, the person he goes to is Jia. He doesn't go to the scientist, he goes to Jia because he knows that Jia will help. Will get him help,
Yeah, what you just said. Oh, go ahead.
Go. No, no, no. You go. You go.
Just what you said just reminded me of something else I wanted to talk to you about that I was really impressed with was Scar King and King Kong were very different. And I was
Mm.
wondering how do you make them that different? Because you're limited because you can't speak, so
Yeah.
literally that's really putting you in a box. So I don't know
Mm.
how you differentiated them so well. How did you do that?
We had I and the team at Wet FX, as well as Adam Wingard and his VFX supervisor Alessandro, we all collaborated on ideas about what kind of vibe these two characters would have, and we tried to find descriptors or like hooks that would kind of get us into the character. And we came up with this idea that Kong, because he is so tough and he's so strong, he faces any problems head on. He'll turn to face it, and he'll square up, either like directly flat to it, or he'll grab his axe and he'll get ready. But he's always presented forward to whatever the problem is.
Mhm.
And he's kind of square. He's built like a refrigerator, and he has that shape. Scar King is tall, but he's skinny and he's lanky and he's long. So we were like, what does that? He can't match Kong pound for pound in terms of power. So
Right.
how does he meet Kong? And we were like, oh well, he's got this length, right? So maybe he's obviously more agile. He's got more reach. He's obviously very clever. He's very, very smart. So Kong squares off against his problems, and he's just like, whatever comes at me, I'm gonna handle it. Whereas Scar King is like, how can I find angles? So a lot of his movement is very sinewy and curvy, and he has all this length. He has speed and he has power, and we see it in the fight scene. But his introduction, when he comes stalking out of that cave, the first
Right.
thing you notice is how long his limbs are, because he's trying to show you that he's got all this size. And
Hmm.
then when he slides up, he suddenly changes speed, and he's quickly at the edge of the cliff. And we came up with this lean, that kind of curve that he has, to give him an unnatural shape that kind of makes you nervous, because you're like, oh, that doesn't look normal. But also, there's a sense of, they wanted him to have this easy kind of sleazy mixture between like a cowboy and a gangster, that
Huh.
he has no problem. He's not worried about what's going to happen, because he's strong enough. He knows he's quick. He knows he's strong. And we leaned into that. Like, it started off as this real kind of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure pose, and they were
Right.
like, let's pull it back a little bit. And we found something that, for anyone who watches like Japanese film or anime, it's very much like a Japanese idea of how a villain moves and stands when they're very,
Hmm.
when they're a little unhinged. And like in Dragon Ball, you see it with Majin Buu. In a lot of Japanese media, you'll see like gangsters or thugs who are trying to be arrogant, and they'll have that kind of lean to their whole body. So we wanted him to have that feeling of, there's something kind of almost like, when you see like eels or snakes, and the way that they don't move straight ahead, they go side to side, and they get to where they're going. But they wanted him to have that movement and that sense of unpredictability. He can go in any direction he wants at any time. Whereas Kong can move, but he has to decide where he wants to go, and then he'll go. You
Battle
know?
tank. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
more.
yeah.
That's
Because he's like,
interesting.
I'm strong enough. I can handle it, right? No, I've got no. He's not worried. He's
Right.
like, I don't need to be sinewy, because like I'm jacked, so I can just take it.
Yeah.
So we tried to find out what those two qualities were for those characters, and then we started to find ways to physicalize and embody those.
Well, yeah, that's a real thing. I actually looked this up the other day because in New Orleans,
Mm.
there are a lot of like people that are not right, kind of wandering around. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that I would get a sense of when somebody wasn't quite all there but I could see it in the way they walked. And so I Googled that, and that's a real thing. I forgot the name of it, but that's an actual thing. Is like if you're not
Yeah.
completely in your mind, you walk in a different way than
Yeah,
if
right.
you're together. So I thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
You could use
I
that.
mean, who knows? Yeah, maybe that was something that they kind of looked at and just didn't tell me because we didn't want to. I mean, I've seen some people throughout my kind of travels across the globe. I've encountered people who are like severely affected by substances, and yeah, the physical change in the way that they stand or even the way that they breathe and look and move is very noticeable.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to yeah, we wanted to make sure that Scar King didn't seem like he was,
Drunk.
he was, well, yeah, but they didn't seem like he was, he needed to seem kind of cold and calculating and evil and
Right.
not just kind of blindly, stupidly powerful.
Mhm.
They wanted him to be really, because that's the threat that he poses, is that he's so conniving and he's so clever.
Right. He's like a snake behind you and sucker punch you kind of
Yeah,
character.
absolutely. Yeah, but he'll also make sure that something happens to make you look over there so he can get behind you.
Right.
He'll manufacture the opportunity for himself to take advantage.
Right.
You
Okay.
know?
So this is kind of with what we're talking about, and this is a big question. So I don't know how you would answer this, but those
Mm-mm.
fight scenes were crazy. Like they were so crazy. They were so good. Like I was like, wow, this is insane.
Mm.
What are you doing? Like how are y'all what are y'all doing to do that? What
Yeah,
because you're like
yeah,
flying
yeah,
in the
yeah,
air and like
yeah.
tearing things heads off. Like can you give me a
On,
general
yeah.
sense of what you're doing?
Honestly, those are the days where it's like the most fun day at work ever because it's like being big kids and you're just kind of play fighting. We have props that we use for the head. There's like literally just two pieces of foam that have been velcroed together, and I get to like tear it apart and imagine that it's like something's jaw. And the zero gravity we have some stunt equipment. One of them is called a halo rig, where you've got like a counterbalanced arm with like, almost like a tuning fork that attaches to a harness with an actor in the middle, and you can lift them up off the ground and counterbalance them, so they're free to move around in the harness. And sometimes we'll just attach a line to a point in the roof and kind of dangle there and try and fight. Sometimes we'll sit on on like almost like a saddle to kind of give you a little bit of that motion. We'll make props out of like wood that's covered in foam and kind of swing it and crash into each other. We bring up big crash mats and we build platforms and we fall off them and we throw each other off. It's just like it's the most fun day when we get to do that stuff.
It sounds like it. That,
Yeah, it
that
is. It's
sounds
it's
so cool.
great. I'm outrageously fortunate that this is my job, because all of the things that 8-year-old Alan wanted to do when he grew up, I'm finding ways to do them, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool. So, so do you have a background in fighting, or like do you
Uh,
learning all that stuff as you
yeah,
go?
yeah, yeah. I grew up doing a lot of physical things. I wanted to be a cartoon when I grew up, so I was like, I need to be fast and agile, and I need to know how to like climb things and ride bikes off sand dunes and jump out of trees. And so I did gymnastics and acrobatics, and I would go surfing and skateboarding and things with my friends. And then as I got older, I started doing like clown work and like kind of doing more like kind of adult gymnastic stuff. And then like drama school, I was doing training and I learned stage combat. I've been doing martial arts since I was like 11. Not that I'm any kind of black belt. I wanted to do it for the aesthetic so that I could figure out how it moved. I had no interest in grading or doing tournaments or kind of, becoming the ultimate weapon. I mean, I probably should have focused on that and I probably would have a different career right now. But, you know, in terms of getting my body in a place where it can do all of the physical things, so that should a stunt coordinator or a director say to me, we've got this character and we want him to feel like he's got a he's a fighter and he's had a little bit of XYZ experience, then I can go, okay, sure, yeah, I think I kind of understand what that means. If someone says, this, maybe it's like there's some kind of Eastern connection, and it's like, is it more like, like a northern kind of Shaolin long fist, or is it like a southern style like Hangar, or is this character just like made out of mud, and they've got legs that are 3 times the size, and how do they slosh around the floor? So I've been doing physical things since I was young, and
Right.
it's it's kind of my favorite way to do cardio, because I really can't go to the gym. I've tried so many times, and I just can't maintain enough interest. But if you take me to an adults gymnastics class, I will do cardio for like an hour straight. It'll just be running, cartwheeling, backflipping, falling off things, climbing things, trying to figure out how to do a B twist. So if and like if I can't get access to a gym, then maybe if it's a nice day, my son and I will go surfing, and like I'll get cardio that way.
Right.
So yeah, I've had to be very creative in my own life in terms of how I trick myself into maintaining this physicality. And I mean, I'm 43 now, and it's getting harder and harder. so I'm having to come up with more creative ways.
Well, you're like fighting dinosaurs and stuff, so you must be doing all right. So did you use any of the previous movies going back to inform what you did, or did you just start fresh?
No, we did definitely, because this current Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong, it's the same Godzilla that was in Godzilla Skull Island. So
Right.
it's a direct follow-on from that Kong. So we looked at some of the ways that Toby Kebbell and Terry Notary, who were the performers for that film, the way that they embodied what Kong was, and we were like, cool, if that was then, and this is like 20 years later, what has changed? So we had like a trajectory to go to. And in terms of like some of the older stuff, like the classic, like the 1933 stop motion Kong, we looked at that. We looked at Peter Jackson's King Kong. We looked at some of the early like side gigs where Kong is like appears as a guest in some of the Godzilla, like was it the Heisei era or the Showa era? One of those two. So we looked at some of that stuff in terms of what were they trying to portray in terms of like he's a wonder of the world, which means he's not just a big ape, he's a titan,
Right.
and what does that mean in terms of the other titans who are around, which has been great, because I did not know that much about kaiju before I got into this. I grew up watching a lot of kaiju films, but I just assumed they were all big monsters. And in the past 3 years, I've learned so much about all of the different kaiju and where they come from and why they exist and how they exist. And I love it, because I'm, the kaiju fandom is really welcoming. They're wonderful. They're like, you want to know about big monsters? We'll tell you. Because it can feel really intimidating to come into an established fandom for
Right.
people who are like, this is my favorite monster ever. And you're like, I hope I didn't annoy you with what I did,
Right.
And and unfortunately you see it a lot, especially in like superhero fandoms. I'm being very generalized here, but if you don't get it exactly right, someone's going to come onto the internet and make your life pretty terrible about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist in every fandom, and maybe I've just had a blessed life. Maybe I've just been very lucky in terms of when I've gone to conventions or when people have talked about the stuff I've worked on the internet. No one has been that harsh about what I'm doing in terms of choices I've made, which feels good.
I know
Because-
why. The reason is because you did a good job. That's why.
Yeah, well, I like to think so.
Yeah, you did.
But also, when I openly admit that I don't know much about kaiju, the fans in this fandom are like fizzing. If they want to tell me facts about their favorite monster or where they appeared or how they fought Godzilla, whatever. And I love that stuff, because I love seeing people sharing the things that they're passionate about, even if I'm not directly passionate about it. Like I'll talk about certain video games till the cows come home, but there are some video games that I I just don't have any interest in. So I'm not going to talk about it. But if my brother wants to talk my ear off about Call of Duty, I'll listen because he loves it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I like passion in people. I can
Yeah,
appreciate passion of other people, and I like to learn. So
yeah, yeah.
it's
And,
interesting.
and right, and I remember when I was younger, I had a lot of strong opinions about things because I thought that's what you did. When I was young, I was like, if you're gonna be, a person of authority in this world, then you have to know what you're talking about, and then, find a hill to die on. And I don't think that's the case. I think that can be dangerous because you shut yourself off from learning things you didn't know because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And there were things I thought about superheroes and comic books when I was, in my 20s that I realized were just ignorance. And,
Right.
Thankfully over the years, I've kind of chilled out and been like, oh yeah, you know what? I didn't know everything about Judge Dredd, even though I had all the comics. So like, let's learn some more. And also,
Yeah.
the more I do this and the more I work on these things, I have to constantly remember, like, it's art and it's fun and it's enjoyable and it's escapism and it's imagination. And, I remember I got into it, when I was in my late 20s, I got into a massive argument about Star Wars. And looking back, that argument actually didn't get either of us anywhere apart from make us really anxious and mad at each other.
Right.
When really, like, if someone doesn't like something about Star Wars, they're allowed to not like something. But
Right.
they don't get to tell me what I like and don't like. And ultimately, it's an art form. And if you want to have discussions about canonically what's right and what's wrong, we can. But is that really the best use of our energy at this point?
Yeah.
And to be fair, I've had people absolutely school me on Star Wars, and I thought I knew everything. But I've had people like just drag me through the dirt because I'm like, you know what? I actually only learned 10% of this and then assumed I knew everything. And someone, rightly so, put me in my place. But they did so in a way where they were like, no, what you don't understand, there's all this other stuff you need to think about. And then in doing so, I was like, oh, you're right. I didn't think about any of that stuff. And now I appreciate any kind of content from that universe.
Right.
Even if it's even if it's got nothing to do with the original trilogy, it's still great because it's Jedi and Sith and Empire and rebels and spaceships and magical powers and blasters and droids. It's things that I love about sci-fi.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah,
world building of Star Wars. I think that was one of the best examples of world building ever.
oh, it's
I guess
fantastic. Yeah,
it's
it's
so
fantastic.
big.
What a wonderful, yeah, it's what an expansive kind of space epic. It's really great. And it took so many things from so many other established stories, sci-fi and otherwise,
Mhm.
and like I don't think that's a bad thing because we all do that. Whenever I'm running or playing tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons or Lancer or whatever, I'm constantly stealing things from other genres and other shows and other stories and other books that I've read because I'm
Right.
like, these are great story ideas and we can use these.
Mark Twain said, "A creative person is only someone that hides their sources well."
Yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
good.
right. Because your imagination can only really grow on the things that you feed it. You don't know
Right.
what you don't know. So the more you consume, whether it's quote unquote good or bad art, the more you consume, the more you have to kind of draw from and reference, right? And some stuff is bad. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, sure. Like let's not forget the 1980s. Almost all of those action films are objectively bad. But they were such a defining point of that 1980s filmmaking journey of action heroes and like paper thin storylines to justify all of this wanton destruction and violence.
Right.
And and we love Jean-Claude Van Damme, we love Arnold Schwarzenegger, we love Sylvester Stallone, we love Dolph Lundgren, we love these men, you know, You know, Bruce Willis, one of our funnest, kind of driest action heroes, and he gave
Yeah.
us one of the best Christmas movies ever. You
Yeah.
know, so like yeah, if it's good or bad, like if you enjoy it, enjoy it. You know?
Yeah. That's
I
that's
mean,
the thing.
you know, like so long as you're not infringing on another person's, you know, human rights and safety, like let's not throw the blanket over everything here. But you know, sometimes you want really well-made action movies, and sometimes you want Michael Dudikoff in American Ninja dressed fighting ninjas in different colored suits in some mansion. Like that's what you want, you
Yeah,
know?
man. I used to do a bad movie show only about bad movies, like B movies and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate
Oh,
that type of
dude.
stuff.
I would love to be in more. Like, look at Bruce Campbell, right? The dude has become the undisputed king of the B movie.
Love him.
Like, I would love to be in a B movie. I would love to be in a Hallmark movie, like a Lifetime movie, because they're so silly, and they're so saccharine. Like, do it, right? You might as well.
I have some
Like, if
bad
they're
news
just
for you. You're going in the wrong direction. You're doing blockbusters.
all I'm saying is maybe a giant monster wants to find love Christmas time. You know?
I would watch that. So, so with King Kong, it's lasted basically as long as movies have existed, particularly King Kong, and it continues, and I guess it will always continue. It seems like it's
I hope so. I
grandfathered
hope so.
in permanently, and it's like a symbol of like classic Hollywood, and it's something that everybody's like, this is our thing, and we're always going to have this, and it's important. And why do you think that character is so beloved and carried through all this time?
Great question. I think it's because when you look at the opportunity for allegory or representation in terms of what Kong or who Kong is, right? If you look at the older stuff, you've got something wonderful and interesting and exotic. You have ideas of like, you know, like he serves as a way to talk about negative aspects of humanity in terms of things like colonization or enslavement or exploitation. But he also represents, you know, like there's an element of like primal strength that is very attractive for an audience, you know, in terms of the suspension of disbelief and this idea of escapism. He represents, in the most recent ones, he represents a protective force of, you know, of care and defense against a threat. You know, like these existential kind of things that we talk about. But he has an element of connectedness. You know, like you look at something like Pacific Rim, right? There's all these big monsters and they're attacking cities and they get beat back by giant robots, which is a fantastic premise and I love it. You know, I grew
Right.
up watching Gundam and Voltron, I love it. But again, inside these giant robots, you've got humans. And the humans have to work together to synchronize to let these robots do what they need to do. So two humans that we recognize have to work together. They have to be in support of each other and in communication to overcome. So this idea that baddies can be defeated, villains can be defeated, evil can be, you know, defeated by good, by looking after each other and coming together. You know,
Right.
and Kong is this thing that he is as big and as powerful as he is. By seeing his connection to Gia, it gives us that wonderful sense of you know, like being perceived and noticed by something greater than ourselves.
Right.
You know, and which thankfully is willing to defend us against the dangerous things, right?
Right.
And like I don't think Kong is alone in that he is a character that's going to persist, because I think Godzilla and kaiju they're always going to persist, because big monsters are a really cool way to introduce so many different ideas. I mean, just
Right.
look, if you look at kaiju, just look at Hedorah, the smog monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally them being like, what if the smog was so dangerous it became sentient and was killing people? Because
Right.
not because monsters are real, but because smog is real and smog is dangerous. You know?
Right.
And
That's what I was gonna say about King Kong too, is that he's so close to nature. Like he's not. I mean, he's giant, but that's the only thing that is out of the realm of possibility that we're aware of. I mean,
that we
who knows?
recognize. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so close. It's like if I have a date with a girl or whatever, and I don't know them that well, and they come over, we'll watch like a nature documentary. Never had any complaints about that, and so I think that it's so close to being real. Like it's
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
on the edge of fantastic. And I think that watching animals fight is always to humans is like, whoa, and I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, there's a connection in all of that mysteriousness and all of that, the kind of fantasy of what Kong is. There's still that connection to things we recognize, like you say, like he looks similar to gorillas and large apes that we have in the real world. He exists in nature, in the natural world where we would expect, and he has shown that he can communicate with humans, which again is something we've observed with great apes over history. So you're right. There's a level of believability to a point, but there are things we can find that, as an audience, is very easy to connect to.
Right. Well, thank you very much for doing this. I've had a wonderful time speaking to you. It was very, very interesting.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you again for reaching out. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff, and I love bumping into people who appreciate this sort of stuff as much as I do. It's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely do. And like I could see it in you, like certain things like, yeah, no, like we're both like, yeah. So I had a good time. So thank you very, very much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, that's about it, everybody. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Mr. Henry. I really enjoyed talking to you. Make sure to follow the page, MC Popsicles World, on Facebook, and check out the rest of our sponsors. First thing is, I would like to give a very special shout out to my new sponsor, Big Ideas Consulting. Make money and grow your business the smart way with Big Ideas Consulting. Please check out Ramicus.com for all the MC Popsicle merchandise. We got buttons, shirts, phone cases, posters, everything. So make sure to get on over to Ramicus.com and get you something. Stop! Before you do anything else, check this out. This is a vintage 90s Ninja Turtle figure that was modeled after the turtles from the movie. I love it. And this is a newer turtle figure. I also love it. You should go to the Toy Stash on Instagram and follow them. They have vintage and new toys. And if you're a toy collector like me, you need to know about them. Follow them on Instagram right now. Another thing you need to do is check out Step On It Rugs on Instagram. They are insane. They made me an MC Popsicle rug. Anything you can imagine, they can make a rug for it. Hit them up. Also, shout out to my shoe sponsor, Solsfing. They make amazing future sneakers that are just bananas. Please follow them on Instagram. You will love their selection.